Greetings, everyone. I'd like to apologize for being late. I had a nasty run-in with a goose this morning, but I'm here now and we can begin the lecture. Now, I will admit, I'm not a very smart man. If you put me on a crashing plane with a gun and two bullets, the plane would still crash. Despite that, I am a sentient being, and like all sentient beings, I pursue happiness. But what is happiness? The great French philosopher Albert Camus once said, "You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life." And he also said, "Those who prefer their principles over their happiness, they refuse to be happy outside the conditions they seem to have attached to their happiness." Now, it took me quite a bit of pondering to fully understand what he was saying here, but I believe what Camus meant here is happiness is not an object that you obtain, nor a goal that you reach. It is not a finish line that you cross. It's a state of mind. If you believe that you can only be happy once you get the big house on the hill, the shiny red car, the high paying job, you will never truly find happiness in what you can acquire. Now, Camus isn't saying be happy with what you have and do not want for more. No, he's saying that if you put all of these conditions on your happiness and say, I will only be happy once I achieve all of these things, you are deciding in that moment to be unhappy and remain unhappy until those things come to pass. So let's say you get the high paying job, you get the shiny red car, but you don't have the big house on the hill. You are unhappy despite all you have achieved. But we can't just look at Camus's teaching through a material lens and say that he was saying don't tie your happiness to material objects. We have to look at it through a spiritual lens as well. Camus said that those who spend their entire lives looking for a meaning to live never truly live. Camus is unlike a lot of other philosophers who spend their entire lives looking for the meaning to their lives. But Camus said there was no meaning to life outside of being absurd. Life is just meant to be silly. Now you may think that that sounds eerily close to nihilism, and Camus is saying there is no reason to live. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. Camus is simply saying that when you look at the grand scheme of life, it's absurd. It doesn't make any sense. It is silly by design, whoever designed it, if anybody designed it. Unlike most philosophers who look at this and they try and understand why, in essence, Camus threw his hands up and said, this doesn't make any sense to me and it never will make sense to any of us, so I'm just going to be happy. In that regard, I imagine Camus would do quite well as an H.P. Lovecraft protagonist. Because rather than go mad at the idea that he is infinitely insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe, he would just say, well, those are the breaks. In essence, Camus believed that there was no reason to try and make sense of something that is absurd by nature, and agonizing over your meaning in life was utterly meaningless. And if there is no meaning to life outside of life is absurd, why wouldn't you choose to be happy? If you want an exemplary example of Camus's teachings, look no further than classic cartoon character SpongeBob SquarePants. SpongeBob SquarePants works a dead-end job as a fry cook in a restaurant that is literally shaped like a trap for aquatic creatures. He is paid next to nothing even after years of dedicated labor. His co-workers cannot stand him. And yet SpongeBob comes into work with a smile on his face every single day. Despite his co-workers' dislike of him, he greets them with a jolly expression every single day. SpongeBob does not want to go off and do bigger and better things despite having the potential to do so. No, SpongeBob wants to work at the Krusty Krab, and eventually he wants to be a manager at the Krusty Krab too. If you look at SpongeBob's life through a material sense, he really has nothing. Nothing that you or I would value, so to speak. But he is still happy because he does not put such conditions on his happiness. He chooses to be happy. He chooses to have good days every day. Now, every time I give this lecture, some student in the crowd says, "Professor, what do you mean SpongeBob has nothing in a material sense? He has a great house." And I ask you, does he really? Look at SpongeBob's house for a second. It is a one-bedroom, one-bath, discarded piece of fruit. His house has rotted away because it's an old piece of fruit. It's been eaten by wildlife because it's an old piece of fruit. Oh, but Professor, he has that expansive library inside. And yes, it's an impressive library, but he essentially lives in a cardboard box. SpongeBob has been homeless on multiple occasions because he does not live in a real house. And if those points don't convince you that SpongeBob doesn't live in a nice house, look at the neighborhood he's in. He's 50 miles outside the city. His one neighbor lives under a rock and is unemployed, and his other neighbor works with him at the Krusty Krab and admittedly has a slightly nicer house, but he's still just living in a gift shop trinket. When Squidward tries to sell his house, the realtor refuses to even put it on the market for him. Now, you could argue that Squidward has a nice house because when he moves into the racially segregated gated community, all the houses look like the one he currently has, but that's a discussion for another time. If you look at the rest of the housing in Bikini Bottom, they are made out of considerably nicer material than fruit. All of the other houses in Bikini Bottom are made out of steel. They're car parts, mufflers. Mr. Krabs, the only millionaire that we know of in Bikini Bottom, lives inside of an anchor, which is the sturdiest metal you could find under the sea. And that's not even talking about Sandy Cheeks, the great gentrifier, who has literally gone into a biome that she is incapable of living in and transformed a part of it into something that suits her needs. Oh, and let's not forget the episode where she literally traffics a bunch of land animals down to the bottom of the sea with her, and one of them escapes and wreaks havoc on the entire town because it's an invasive species. Sorry to get off on a tangent there. Let me get back to the matter at hand. SpongeBob does not live in a nice neighborhood. He does not live in a nice house. His neighborhood is actually a regular victim to Flying Dutchman attacks. Let's not forget that either. And actually, we can talk about a few more natural disasters that always strike SpongeBob's neighborhood first. The nematodes, the hooks, the Alaskan bullworm. And you know what? I'm sorry, class, but I'm gonna have to go off on another tangent because the handling of the Alaskan bullworm incident made me sick. The Alaskan bullworm blows through Bikini Bottom and does untold property damage to several buildings. It eats part of SpongeBob's house. It eats a guy's ass. Literally eats his ass. Not in the way that you college kids do it nowadays. It literally bites a chunk out of him. This natural disaster hits Bikini Bottom, and King Neptune is nowhere to be found. The mayor of Bikini Bottom is nowhere to be found. No elected officials emerge to do anything to help the people. It's up to a bunch of people in a fast food restaurant in the Krusty Krab to solve the Alaskan bullworm problem. Imagine if a tornado tore through our town tomorrow and destroyed several homes and potentially killed people, and it was up to a bunch of citizens in a Burger King to figure out how to move forward. Where were the elected officials? Where was the government aid? Where was the National Guard? If you can honestly sit here and tell me that SpongeBob lives in a nice house, then you have not been listening. He lives in a cardboard box in the worst part of town, in a town that the ocean government clearly does not care about. And yet SpongeBob is still happy because he does not place conditions on his happiness. He wakes up and says this is the best day ever before anything good has even happened to him. You know who does not share that philosophy, though? Squidward. Squidward believes that he should be a famous artist, whether that be a famous musician or famous painter or famous sculptor. He believes that he should already be recognized for his talents. And because he believes that he cannot be happy until he is recognized for those talents, he lives his life unhappily. He effectively chooses to be miserable, and it keeps him from changing the things that he is unhappy about. He wastes away at a job that he hates because he believes that his meaning in life and his one true path to happiness is to become a famous artist, so that keeps him from going out and seeking a different job that might be better than where he's working now. Squidward believes that he's only going to be happy when his art is in museums and he is playing the clarinet on stage. So what does it matter if he goes and becomes a bank teller? He's going to not be happy there either, right? I think the purest example of Squidward choosing to not be happy is the episode where he moves into a gated community made up of people that are just like him. Squidward moves into this neighborhood and is happy for a while. He has everything he's ever wanted: canned bread, jam sessions in the park, dance classes, but very quickly he becomes unhappy. Why? Because he starts living. It's all so new and exciting at first, but once the new and exciting settles in and it becomes his routine, he can't handle it anymore. Like I said, he has everything that he's ever wanted, and now he has nothing to want. He has decided that his meaning in life is to want more rather than acknowledging there is no grander meaning and to just enjoy living. SpongeBob and Squidward are in the exact same boat, and only one of them is upset about it. I hope all that SpongeBob talk helped you all understand Camus's teachings a bit better. And I hope you were taking notes today, because everything I've talked about will be on the finals next week. Now, I'm going to take a short bathroom break, and when I return, we will talk about the myth of Sisyphus and how it relates to the Disney seasons of the cartoon Doug.